Hi, it's Troy. Welcome back to the channel of The Lonely Wolf. So today I'm going to present another book review. So this time I'm going to focus on history. Alright, my last book review was a 101 survey course of art history, so I chose Glittering Images by Camille Paglia as a book that exemplifies sort of a large vision, so an introduction to a discipline you might not have done before. So as you know, I'm a very big proponent of lifelong learning. So I believe I'm very strongly in favour of 101 type courses, so especially at a university level, that people should be exposed to just the 101, the grand ideas, rather than this sort of specialisation. Now, of course, every discipline you major in, you obviously have to specialise and develop a level of expertise, but I think there also, at the beginning, there needs to be a broader vision, and that's really what I'm trying to bring about. Particularly in the education of today's generation, I believe in bringing back big ideas and painting a larger picture of what things look like. So I introduced that with art, so looking at the beginning up until the contemporary art and getting an overall picture in our mind of what it looks like. So today I'm going to do the same thing with history. So the book I've chosen and I've read through, it's called A Little History of the World by E.H. Gombrich. Right, so this was written a long time ago. So I actually would consider this the Harry Potter of history textbooks. Okay, so it's a very thin book that covers all the way from ancient times up until probably World War II is where it ended, because unfortunately the author only lived at a certain time, so he died before he could write the rest of the history. Okay, so this book is particularly aimed towards children. Okay, so it brings back that appreciation of still imagery, artistic appreciation, as well as a narrative type of approach. So it presents history as almost a once upon a time type narrative. Okay, so the reason I call it the Harry Potter of history books is that even though it may have been aimed towards children at its conception, the mums and dads enjoyed the particular series and they started getting into it. And likewise, even as adults, I actually really enjoyed this book. It sort of brought history to life, and almost the text almost came out of the page, and it was almost like I was living through the experiences throughout history. Okay, so firstly, the presentation's beautiful. So the cover is, very enticing. So you'll want to read when you see the cover of it. Now, also the illustrations. So it's a glossy paper, and there's a lot of illustrations. So if you buy this book, I recommended the updated illustrated version of this rather than the plain text. Particularly if you want to share this sort of thing with your children, and you want them to be interested in history. So for example, this is a typical page. Alright, so just about every page is filled with very colourful sort of artworks that depict some of the relics from the age of antiquity. Right, so through each era of history, we have a particular image that comes to mind. Now, I think that's really an important part of history, because I remember having these sort of books, or something similar, but they were a lot bulkier and thicker. But I remember having those coffee table type books, growing up and as a teenager, just flicking through step by step, and it gives me this visual kind of image of what history looks like from the beginning. So I see a cave painting, so I think that's the Stone Ages, and I see a picture of the Colosseum, so I think that's ancient Rome, and then castles, I think of the medieval times. So obviously when you flick through a book like that, it's great to see that imagery come to life, and that's really what I want to bring back to contemporary education, because I feel that history has become fragmented. So what I've seen through my experience with dealing with teenagers is that often there's this limited understanding, so it's kind of this picking and choosing of all these different themes in history and just presenting it in a very fragmented way. Now, I'm of a very old school, so Generation X, I feel like I'm calling myself old now, that I believe that history starts at the beginning and then we work our way through chronologically. Because the reasons why, there's so many benefits, because really history is answering a lot of questions. So, where did we come from, where are we now, and where are we heading? So the true appreciation of history and the chronological order, it enables us to look at the big picture of humanity. So it enables us to look at particular patterns, so the rise and fall of particular civilizations, the freedom versus parts where there was authoritarianism. Okay, so we can look at patterns and perhaps we can predict what's going to be happening now. So I feel like that's missing in a lot of the current academia. So no matter what age you are, I do recommend like survey type courses if there's something that might be of interest to you. Now, obviously there's scope for people to go further than that. So this presents the overall picture. But if there's a particular part of history you're interested, so for example, for me, I'd be more interested in the Roman Empire. I'm sort of interested in the specific events that kind of led to the rise as well as the fall of that particular empire, because it only presents me the overall arching picture. Okay, now to give you an idea of the mission of this book, so I'm going to read you the introductory statement. Alright, so this is a great way of opening the book. So I think it really grabs your attention and it really speaks to sort of a new generation. Alright, so the chapter 1 is called Once Upon a Time. Alright, so I'm just going to read a little bit. So all stories begin with once upon a time, and that's just what this story is all about. What happened once upon a time? Once you were so small that even standing on your tiptoes you could barely reach your mother's hand. Do you remember? Your own history might begin like this. Once upon a time there was a small boy, or a small girl, and that small boy was me. But before that you were a baby in a cradle. You won't remember that, but you know it's true. Your father and mother were also small once, and so was your grandfather and your grandmother, a much longer time ago, but you know that too. After all, we say, they are old, but they too had grandfathers and grandmothers, and they too would say, once upon a time, and so it goes on further and further back. Behind every once upon a time, there is always another. Have you ever tried standing between two mirrors? You should. You will see a great long line of shiny mirrors, each one smaller than the one before, stretching away into the distance, getting fainter and fainter, so that you never see the last, and even when you can't see them anymore, the mirrors will still go on. They are there and you know it. And that's how it is with Once Upon a Time. We can't see where it ends. Grandfather's 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 grandfather. It makes your head spin. But say it slowly, and in the end you'll be able to imagine it. Okay? So that's a very enticing introduction, I think, and it's a great way to open up the narrative of history as the once upon a time type narrative. So that's why I consider that to be kind of the Harry Potter of historical fiction, not historical fiction, historical non-fiction as a factual book. Okay, so some of the limitations of this book, so because of the author's death, and that's beyond his control, so it only covers up to World War II, so obviously the Cold War era and what happened to the generations after that, so that's kind of missing from this particular book. Okay, so that's not, we can't really criticize the author for that. So the other thing is maybe some of the language might have been politically incorrect because it was written a long time ago for children, but I think it still stands today as a good children's book. But because of the era, some of the language might be a little politically incorrect. So for example, they describe the Asians, so the first encounter between Asians from the East as well as the Western cultures. So they described that as meeting the yellow, slanty-eyed people. So the Europeans were threatened when they first met this particular race. Alright, so obviously in today's type of textbooks, you wouldn't see that type of language, but maybe that's a good opportunity to discuss, the changing nature of the kind of words that we can choose to describe people in history. Also, I'm aware that a lot of my followers are part of the skeptic community, so I think that exploring history, I think it's a very interesting discussion to be had among the skeptics. Particularly, it was really interesting once I reached the story of sort of Hebrew settlement. So the story of the slavery in Egypt, and then the kind of migration across. So it started in Babylon and then it went back. So we saw these historical events kind of coinciding with things that are in the Bible. So it gets us thinking about the birth of religion, and it seems to come across as kind of an exaggeration of historical events. So the idea of the Bible being created from some of the things that happen in history. So for example, the Tower of Babel, which is just a relic from Babylon, being used as a biblical story, as well as kind of Moses, the freeing of the slaves and the journey to the sort of promised land. So there's a lot of stories that come about from that. So it's an exaggeration of history, sort of like an embellishment, but you see that same theme recurring over and over again. So you see it, so for example, the founding of ancient Greece, you see the legend of Troy, so the Iliad and the Odyssey. And then with the ancient Roman civilizations, you're seeing the story of Romulus and Remus and that particular age. So you're seeing sort of particular religions as being perhaps an exaggeration of the history of that particular time. So if you're a skeptic, you'll probably see history in that particular way. Right, so overall I'd recommend this book so to anyone who wants an introduction in history, and this is kind of a family book, so treat it as something that's very, very sacred to me, so something to be enjoyed. And I think for children, it can be enjoyed and something they'll take with them all through high school, through university, just because of the kind of appeal of all the pictures and the way in which it's written is quite beautiful. Alright, so for the older audiences, so even if you're an adult, I still recommend this book. I think you'd enjoy it. So the next book I'm going to review, once I finish reading it, is The Story of Mankind. Okay, so it's obviously a lot more adult, but it still has some interesting type of illustrations in it. But it also has the same mission. So in a condensed book, it tells the history of civilization. But I think the advantage of this book is because after the original author died, there was a new edition that was made. So if you're purchasing this book, I recommend the updated edition that includes everything. So it includes the 9/11 as part of the history. So it also includes the 2000 presidential election. So Al Gore and George Bush. Right, and it almost so it was written quite a short time ago, so it really so captures some of the modern things that are happening and puts it into a certain perspective as part of our narrative in history. Okay, so that was my book review, so I hope you enjoyed it. Now if you have time, so I'd love you to check out my philosophy of mathematics video. Now even though people might be scared of a maths video, so I just want people to be rest assured that if I introduce mathematics in my channel, I'm going to be under the presumption that my viewers haven't done much maths before. So if I introduce mathematics, I'll do it in a very gradual process. So I'm going to treat it as an educational maths video. But if you're also one of those people who are very literate at mathematics, try to think of it as an enhancement. So I'm bringing philosophy into mathematics, and I'm presenting some questions that you may not have considered in if you're proficient at mathematics, so you're used to using a lot of the numbers we talk about. But I sort of take it a little bit further and look at some of the theories and some of the literature that questions the nature of existence, the nature of beauty, as well as logic and reasoning. Alright, so it's an educational type video, so I'd love you to check out that part of my channel as well. Alright, now I'll see you in my next video, so I'm going to go into more depth with this book here and give you my thoughts on that. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed my book review, and I hope you enjoy my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.